All right, so get ready, because we're diving into a future that's even stranger than any sci-fi movie out there, the emulation era. We're going to be talking about a world where human consciousness, it's not held back by our bodies anymore. It just exists as pure information, as M's.
Yeah, but it's more than just uploading your brain to a computer. Imagine a world where you could actually make copies of yourself. You could speed up your thinking or slow it down. You could even just hit pause on your own consciousness. I mean, that's the kind of crazy stuff we're going to be looking at today.
Okay, so I'm already getting a little mind blown here. So we're not just talking about, living forever. We're talking about like a total transformation of what it even means to be human. But for those of us who aren't quite in singularity level thinking, let's break it down a little. What exactly is an M?
Okay, so think of it this way. An M is a digital replica of a human brain. And it has all the memories, skills, even like personality quirks. It's all perfectly preserved in code. It's like having a digital twin that can think, learn, and experience the world just like a person, but without the biological stuff holding it back.
So it's like having a backup of your brain.
Yeah.
But that backup is actually conscious and can go out and do things in the world. So that brings up some big questions, right?
Yeah.
What would an emulated society look like? How would they, how would they work? How would they live? How would they even fall in love?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where our deep dive comes in.
We got this book, The Age of M, from an economist, Robin Hanson. And wow, this book really goes all in on this whole M era thing.
Yeah, it really does. It's amazing how Hanson can take something that feels like it's straight out of science fiction and ground it in real economic and social science. Yeah. This isn't just like some fun thought experiment. It's a deep dive into what could actually be our future.
Yeah, for sure. So Hanson's main argument is that human history is made up of these distinct eras. We had foraging, then farming, then the industrial era, and now M's are like the next big leap. It's like leveling up as a species.
It is like leveling up. And he calls the beginning of the M era the dream time, which sounds kind of nice, but actually he's talking about a period of huge upheaval. It's like when you get a major software update on your phone, right? Like everything's faster and there's all this new stuff, but you got to relearn how to do basic things. Hanson's saying a lot of our current behavior, stuff that makes sense now, will be totally outdated in the M era.
So it's not just about the technology changing. It's like a whole societal learning curve. We have to relearn how to be human in this new world. And get this, Hanson points out this pattern where each era's community size is basically the square of the one before it. If that continues, we're talking about M communities with trillions of individuals. That's more people than stars in the Milky Way.
I know it's almost impossible to grasp the scale, right? But that leads to some really interesting questions about economics. Because a trillion-person community would operate so differently from anything we've ever seen.
So let's start with something that really jumped out at me. This idea of M speed. It's not just that, they think faster than us. It's like their whole perception of time is different, right?
That's right. Because M's are essentially software. They can run at different speeds. It just depends on the processing power, So imagine an M that's running like 1,000 times faster than a human. A single day for them could feel like centuries.
Whoa. Talk about living life in the fast lane. But wouldn't that create some serious communication problems between M's and humans? I mean, it'd be like trying to have a conversation with a hummingbird that's just chugged a bunch of espresso.
Yeah, it definitely creates a challenge.
But let's shift gears for a second and talk about where these M's would actually live. I mean, picture it, a city filled with these tiny, super fast beings. What would that even look like?
Well, Hanson paints a picture of M cities that are unlike anything we've ever seen. Imagine cities that are incredibly dense because much of the interaction happens in the virtual realm, and congestion just isn't a major factor.
So we're talking mega cities, but without the traffic jams and crowded sidewalks. I could get behind that.
But here's where the speed difference comes into play again. Hanson suggests the possibility of speed neighborhoods, where M's cluster with others who operate at similar speeds.
Wait, so you're telling me there might be a district where everything moves at super speed and another where life is more laid back? It's like time zones, but in a city.
It's a fascinating concept, isn't it? Think about the social dynamics. Would faster M's view slower M's as less intelligent or capable? Would there be a kind of speed hierarchy within these cities?
It's almost like a digital caste system based on processing power. And what about the practicalities? Would these cities need totally different infrastructure?
Absolutely. Think massive climate control systems to manage the heat generated by all those M brains, maybe even energy generation from the heat itself.
So we're talking cities that are not only super efficient, but also incredibly sustainable. It's like science fiction meets urban planning. So M's are super fast, but what about their physical form? What would it be like to live in an M body?
Hansen calls this the Lilliputian experience. Because M's don't have the same biological constraints as humans, their bodies could be designed much smaller.
Oh, tiny.
They might be tiny, but the laws of physics affect them differently. Gravity feels weaker, and they move at different energy-efficient speeds.
So it's like a whole different set of rules for these little guys. It's like they're living in a different dimension, even if they're sharing the same planet.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really trippy. Copies.
Ah, yes. The ability to create copies of M's adds another layer of complexity. Imagine entire clans composed of identical copies of the same individual.
Hold on a second. Multiple versions of the same person. Wouldn't that lead to some serious identity crises? How do you even define yourself when there are a dozen of you running around?
That's one of the most mind-boggling aspects of the M world. It forces us to reconsider our understanding of individuality. If you can be copied, merged, even deleted, what does it even mean to be a unique self?
I'm already feeling a little existential angst just thinking about it. Okay, let's talk about what would the economy be like in a society where you can just copy workers whenever you need them?
Yeah, it would completely change everything we know about supply and demand. Like, imagine if you needed more people for a project. You wouldn't have to hire anyone new or train them. You could just make copies of the M's you already have. That's where the concept of spurs comes in. These are short-lived M copies created for very specific tasks. They exist for a brief time, complete their task with incredible efficiency, and then they're gone.
Wow, that's both efficient and a little bit unsettling. It's like a workforce of disposable minds. But hey, at least you wouldn't have to worry about writing performance reviews.
It raises some interesting ethical questions, though, doesn't it? What are the rights of these temporary M's? What are the implications of creating and terminating consciousness on such a massive scale?
That sounds like it would lead to some crazy economic growth, right? But wouldn't it also mean that wages would go down? Because if M's are so easy to copy, wouldn't they be worth less?
Yeah, that's a really important point. Some economists think that wages in an M economy could drop a lot, maybe even close to the cost of just running the hardware and, providing the energy they need.
So even though M's might have this incredible abundance in their world, they might end up working for, like, digital pennies. It makes you wonder, what would even motivate them at that point?
That's a great question. It really makes us rethink everything we know about work and rewards. Some theorists think that M's might find motivation in other things, like, pursuing knowledge or creativity, or even just really immersive simulations and virtual reality experiences. I mean, with a potentially unlimited lifespan, there's a lot more time to explore different things, right?
It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but for digital beings.
Yeah.
But if efficiency is the top priority in this world, would there even be room for things like art or philosophy or, just enjoying a nice afternoon doing nothing?
That's a crucial question. Would an M society that values efficiency above all else actually end up losing some of the things that we think of as essential to a good life? Would there be a balance between being super productive and just, appreciating existence?
Wow, this is giving me way more questions than answers, but I'm totally hooked.
Ah.
Okay, so we've talked about M speed and city planning and economics. But what about social structures? How would things like gender roles and family and relationships even work in a world where you can copy yourself?
That's where it gets even more interesting. There's this idea of clans that emerges. So imagine like extended families made up of copies of the same original brain. They could have these incredibly strong support networks, share resources, and even work together on big projects.
It's like having a built-in team of people who think just like you. That could be incredibly powerful. But wouldn't that also make things like really complicated when it comes to identity?
Yeah.
Like what makes you you if there are multiple versions of you out there?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole idea of self gets a lot more complicated in the emulation era. Imagine you can just spin off a copy of yourself to do something specific, like write a report or go to a meeting. Would that copy still be you? Would it have its own consciousness? And what happens to it when it's done with its task?
This is making my head spin. It's like that ship of Theseus thing. It's the one about replacing the parts, right? But on a whole other level.
Exactly. Imagine this ship that gradually has all its parts replaced over time. Each plank, each sail, everything. It's all eventually swapped out for a new piece.
So it's like a constant renovation project, keeping that ship in tip-top shape.
Right. But here's the question. At what point does it stop being the original ship? If every single component is new, is it still the ship of Theseus?
That's a tough one. It makes you think about What really defines something's identity? Is it just the sum of its parts, or is there something more, like some intangible essence that sticks around even when things change?
And if it is the sum of its parts, what about the old parts? Like, what if someone collected all the discarded planks and sails and built a new ship out of them? Would that be the real ship of Theseus?
Okay, now my head's spinning. It's like a philosophical game of musical chairs with ship parts.
Right.
We're definitely going to need a bigger whiteboard to figure all this out.
It seems like the emulation era forces us to really rethink some of our most basic ideas about consciousness, identity, and, what it even means to be human.
How about death? How does death even factor into a world where you can create unlimited copies of yourself?
That's a great question.
Wouldn't that make death irrelevant?
It sort of does.
It's like hitting the undo button on life, right?
That's the mind-bending part.
Okay.
The ease of copying completely changes the concept of death.
Wow.
Hansen introduces possibilities like mind merging, where two M copies merge their experiences.
Wow.
And selective archiving, where specific versions of you are preserved.
Mind merging, so two versions of you become one, combining their knowledge and experiences.
That's the idea.
That sounds intense.
It would be.
But wouldn't you lose a part of yourself in the process?
It's possible.
And selective archiving, is that like choosing your best self and hitting save?
Yeah, kind of like that.
Makes you wonder what happens to the versions that don't make the cut.
Yeah.
Are they just deleted?
It's not clear.
Do they have any rights?
Those are great questions.
These are exactly the kind of questions Hansen's work provokes.
Absolutely.
It challenges our understanding of life, death, and what it means to be an individual.
Right.
In a world where identity becomes fluid and potentially fragmented.
Exactly.
Okay, my brain is officially fried.
Yeah, it really makes you think, like, are we on the brink of a new era of existence?
Yeah.
One where the lines between life and death and reality and simulation become totally blurred?
Speaking of blurred lines, we've been tossing around this phrase, cheap death.
Yeah.
And I think it deserves a closer look because it sounds almost flippant.
Right.
Like death is no big deal in a world of M's.
It's not so much about flippancy, I think, as it is about a fundamental shift in perspective.
Okay.
If you can effortlessly create copies of an M,
right,
deleting one, even your most recent version,
yeah,
isn't really the end. It's more like erasing a draft of a document.
Uh-huh.
Inconvenient, maybe, but not catastrophic.
So are you saying M's wouldn't fear death the way we do?
It's possible.
Would they be out there jumping off virtual skyscrapers and taking all these crazy risks because they know they could always hit the reset button?
It's conceivable that they might be more willing to take risks, especially physical ones.
Oh.
But I think their anxieties might manifest in different ways.
Oh, really?
Imagine the fear of having your entire mind copied without your consent.
Yeah.
All your thoughts and memories stolen.
Oh.
It's like identity theft, but on a whole other level.
That's terrifying.
Right.
So if physical harm isn't a big deal, what would M's value most? What would their ethical framework look like?
Hansen suggests that their values might prioritize reputation and social standing above all else.
Okay.
In a world where copies are plentiful,
right,
your digital identity becomes your most precious asset.
Yeah.
Damaging that reputation could be a fate worse than deletion.
That's a fascinating concept. It's like a society built on digital karma.
Yeah.
Where your online persona holds more weight than your physical body.
Exactly.
So how would these M's, with their unique anxieties and values, interact with each other?
Yeah.
Would they form meaningful relationships?
That's a great question.
Or would it all be transactional?
Right.
Just a constant exchange of information and resources?
Well, Hansen explores this concept of mind merging.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
Where two M copies perhaps diverged after accumulating different experiences, combine their minds.
Okay.
It's like a reunion, but on a mental level, pooling their memories and skills to become a more complete version of themselves.
Okay. That's just wild. Imagine merging your mind with another version of yourself.
Right.
All those memories flooding in at once.
Yeah.
It would be overwhelming, exhilarating, maybe even terrifying.
It would be a lot to process.
Would you still be you after such a merger?
It raises these profound questions about identity and individuality.
Yeah.
Would you retain your sense of self, or would you become something entirely new, a composite being shaped by the experiences of your other selves?
We've talked a lot about M's, but what about us?
Right.
What would happen to humanity in this brave new world?
Yeah.
Would we be relegated to the sidelines just watching as our digital offspring takes center stage?
Hansen suggests an interesting possibility that humans could become the retirees of the M era.
Retirees.
Yeah, because remember, we'd still own the physical infrastructure,
Right.
the resources that fuel this whole M economy. We could potentially live quite comfortably while M's do the heavy lifting, so to speak.
So we'd be like the landed gentry living off the digital labor of our emulated offspring.
In a way, yes.
I guess it's better than being completely obsolete.
Yeah.
But it does raise some concerns.
Sure.
What's to stop the M's from rebelling?
Right.
Or just deciding they don't need us anymore?
It's a valid concern, and Hansen acknowledges the potential for conflict.
Okay.
But he also points out that M's would initially depend on us for certain things.
Like what?
Well, maintaining that physical infrastructure, ensuring access to resources, even safeguarding their continued existence.
So it's like a delicate dance between dependence and dominance. We provide the physical foundation. They provide the digital innovation.
Right.
But like any dance, things could get out of step pretty quickly.
They could.
What happens if the music stops?
That's the unpredictable element.
Yeah.
It's impossible to know for sure how the dynamics would shift over time.
Right.
But by considering these possibilities now, we can start to think about how to navigate this uncharted territory to build a future where both humans and M's can thrive.
And we're just getting started. We still need to explore what this means for things like love, family structures, even the nature of death itself. We're definitely going to need a part 2 for this.
For sure, and maybe even a part 3 to really dive into the political landscape of the emulation era. Imagine things like voting systems based on speed, M-clans fighting for power, and the possibility of surveillance on a level we've never seen before. It's a future that's both exciting and, kind of terrifying.
This is seriously mind-blowing stuff. I can't wait to jump back in and see what other weirdness is waiting for us. And for everyone listening, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next part of our emulation era journey. We'll be back soon to talk about love, family, and maybe even the meaning of life itself in a world where you can copy and change consciousness just like software. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our exploration of the emulation era.
So last time we left off, our minds were like sufficiently boggled, by that whole M speed thing. And cities planned around processing power and economies where labor is just like copy and paste.
Right. So now let's get a little more personal. Let's explore what life would actually be like for an M. Like how relationships and family and even the whole idea of self might change in this digital world.
Okay, yeah, let's dive into the messy world of M emotions. Our sources seem to say that even though M sex would mostly be for fun, the desire for companionship and connection, that doesn't just disappear.
Yeah, it seems like even when you get rid of all the biological stuff, humans or, M's still need intimacy and a sense of belonging.
So like, are we talking Tinder profiles in the emulation era, but instead of hobbies, it's like processing speed and RAM specs? Swipe right for a soulmate with compatible software.
Maybe. But it makes you think, what does attraction even mean when you can just change your personality or make a copy of yourself that's like perfectly matched to someone else?
Wait, hold on. Are we talking about making the perfect partner? Like designing an M who likes all the same things you do and never argues and always remembers your anniversary?
It could happen, but wouldn't that kind of ruin the whole point? I mean, where's the fun in discovering someone who doesn't challenge or surprise you?
Right. What's the point of a relationship if there's no room to like grow or change or even have a good argument every now and then? Plus, can you imagine like falling in love with an M and then finding out they have like 100 other copies all dating different people?
Yeah, and that brings up the whole question of like jealousy and possessiveness. Would those emotions even exist in the same way when copies are so normal? Would an M care if their partner made a copy to hang out with someone else, or would they see it as like just expanding their social circle?
It all depends on how emulated minds see individuality, I guess. If a copy is just seen as like an extension of the original, then maybe jealousy wouldn't be a thing. But if each copy develops its own identity and experiences, then things could get messy.
Definitely. And let's not forget about celebrity M clones. Imagine a world where you could download a copy of your favorite actor or musician, or even like a historical figure.
Oh, sign me up for a coffee with a digital Einstein. But would it really be fulfilling? Wouldn't part of what makes someone special be their unique experiences and achievements, the things a copy might not have?
Exactly. It seems like even in the digital world, authenticity and real connections still matter. A copy might have the same memories and personality, but would it really be the same person?
It makes you wonder if the emulation era would lead to like a whole new kind of romanticism, one that values individuality and real connection over this like perfect digital ideal.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of connection, let's move on to family structures. We already talked about M clans, but what about having kids?
Yeah, like would M's even want kids? I mean, why bother with digital diapers and tantrums when you could just make a fully grown adult copy?
Well, it seems like emulated children would actually be pretty rare.
Really? Why is that? Is it like a technical thing or is there something more to it?
It seems like the process of growing up, learning and developing over time, that's seen as really important for forming a sense of self.
So even though an M could theoretically be created with all the knowledge and skills of an adult, they wouldn't have all those experiences that shape who they are.
Exactly. It's not just about downloading information. It's about the journey, the mistakes, the lessons learned. All that messy stuff contributes to what makes a life, even a digital one, meaningful.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it. So childhood isn't like obsolete in the emulation era. It's just streamlined.
Maybe. Imagine a world where childhood is faster, sped up, but still a crucial part of becoming a well-rounded M.
Okay, so we've got M speed dating, celebrity clones, digital toddlers. What about the big one? Death. Does that even exist if you can just back up your consciousness?
That's a big question. While actually dying might be pretty uncommon, it seems that M's would be more afraid of mind theft than anything else.
Mind theft. Like someone hacking into your brain and stealing your thoughts. That sounds terrifying.
It's a real concern. Someone could steal a copy of an M's mind to exploit their skills or get access to their memories or even torture them digitally.
Okay, adding mind theft prevention software to my emulation era shopping list. But if dying isn't really a big deal, how would that change how M's think? Would they be more reckless?
Yeah.
Less motivated?
Yeah, some sources say that M's might be less afraid of taking risks. I mean, if you can just make a backup of yourself, why worry about messing up?
I guess that makes sense. But wouldn't that also make their accomplishments feel less important? Like if you can just undo any mistake, does anything really matter?
That's a good question. It seems like even in a world with easy backups, there would still be a need for purpose and meaning.
Right. It's not just about existing. It's about striving for something, achieving something, making a difference, even if that difference can be digitally reversed.
Maybe the whole idea of legacy would take on a new meaning in the emulation era. Instead of leaving behind physical things, M's might focus on creating lasting digital art, or contributing to knowledge, or even building complex simulations that, push the boundaries of consciousness.
So instead of building pyramids or writing symphonies, M's might be making virtual universes or composing digital operas, like the Renaissance, but with ones and zeros.
Exactly. The possibilities for creativity and innovation seem endless. And with potentially unlimited lifespans, M's could spend centuries mastering a skill, exploring vast virtual worlds, or even going out into the real universe.
Okay, my brain is officially overloaded. We've talked about love, family, death, even the meaning of life in the emulation era.
But there's one big part of M society we haven't talked about yet: politics. How do you govern a world of digital minds that think at different speeds and might have completely different goals?
That's a question for the ages. Will we see M dictatorships or benevolent AI overlords, or maybe some kind of awesome digital democracy that we can't even imagine yet?
We're going to dive into all those possibilities and more in the final part of our emulation era deep dive.
For everyone listening, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the big finale. We'll be back soon to tackle the tricky issues of power dynamics and how humans might fit into this crazy new digital world. Stay tuned. All right, so welcome back to the deep dive. We've gone through all this crazy stuff with emulated relationships, thought about what self even means in a world full of copies, and we even dipped our toes into that whole digital death thing.
Right, but there's one last big area to explore, and that's the politics of the emulation era. Get ready, because this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, so let's talk power. I'm kind of picturing it like a digital Wild West. You've got M clans all fighting for control, rogue AIs trying to take over, and hackers holding entire cities hostage with mind theft threats.
It definitely has the potential for some serious chaos, but our sources also suggest that there could be some surprisingly complex ways of governing this world. Remember how we talked about M speed and those city zones?
Yeah, the faster your processing speed, the closer you are to the center of the city, right?
Yeah.
So are we talking about a speedocracy? The faster your brain runs, the more power you have.
It's not quite that simple, but there is this idea of speed-weighted voting that comes up. Basically, an M's vote would count for more based on their processing speed. The thinking is that faster M's can make better decisions faster, so they'd have a bigger impact on society.
So it's like a digital meritocracy. Your brain power determines how much political influence you have. But wouldn't that, create a huge imbalance? What about slower M's, or the ones who'd rather focus on things like art or just relaxing? Would they just become like a digital underclass?
That's definitely a worry. The sources talk a lot about the need for checks and balances to make sure no one group gets too much power, whether it's based on speed, clan affiliation, or anything else.
So we might see different factions teaming up, kind of like political parties, but based on things like processing power, shared interests, or even like philosophical beliefs?
Exactly. There could be all sorts of different political systems. We might see digital democracies where every M votes on everything directly, or maybe representative systems where elected officials speak for their constituents.
But how do you even run for office in a world where information travels at the speed of thought? Are we talking about holographic rallies, subliminal messages in VR, or even like directly stimulating people's brains to get them to vote for you?
The possibilities are pretty mind-blowing. Political campaigns could get incredibly sophisticated, using advanced AI and personalized messages to target specific groups of Ms.
Sounds like it could get pretty intense, like some kind of digital information war. But we can't forget about the good stuff either. What about using these technologies to make the government more transparent and accountable?
That's a really important point. Imagine a world where every political decision, every financial transaction, every interaction between Ms and the government is recorded and available for anyone to see.
So no more shady backroom deals or secret lobbying. Transparency could be the best way to fight corruption and prevent people in power from abusing it.
Exactly. It could lead to a much more engaged and informed population where Ms are actively involved in shaping the policies that affect their lives.
That sounds pretty utopian. But let's be real. Wherever there's power, there's a chance for abuse. What about the potential for surveillance, manipulation, even like thought control?
Yeah, that's something that a lot of researchers are worried about. The same technology that could empower Ms could also be used to watch their every thought, track their movements, and even influence their decisions.
We already talked about mind theft, but imagine that happening on a society-wide scale. A government that can see into the minds of its citizens that's like something straight out of a dystopian novel.
It's definitely a slippery slope. Finding the right balance between security and freedom, using this technology for good while also protecting people from its potential for harm, that's going to be the biggest challenge of the emulation era.
It's like we're standing on the edge of a whole new world, one that's full of amazing possibilities, but also some really scary ones. And the decisions we make now, the ethical lines we draw, those are going to shape what that future looks like.
The sources really emphasize the need for open discussion, thoughtful debate, and a willingness to change our laws and morals to keep up with this rapidly changing technology.
Because the future isn't just something that happens to us, it's something we make. And in the emulation era, our choices will have consequences that affect both the digital and physical worlds.
It's a good reminder that technology isn't inherently good or bad, it's just a tool. And it's up to us as individuals and as a society to decide how we're going to use it.
And it's important to note that this book was written in 2016, a time right before the current AI explosion we're living through. So the author assumed that, based on the historically slow advancements of AI development, the whole AI winter and all that advancements in digital brain uploads in the form of brain emulations would eventually become the norm and the cutting edge in terms of forms of artificial intelligence used. We are definitely seeing way more progress in the realm of pure generative artificial intelligence now. However, the question remains if this synthetic form of AI will ever gain consciousness. If it doesn't, in the end, forms of digital copies of our brains might indeed win out the AI technological race.
That's totally right. We're dealing with a book on futurism, so these scenarios might still be in play.
Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We started with M-speed and digital cities, then we talked about emulated relationships, and now we've even explored the possibilities for both utopian and dystopian political systems.
It's been an amazing, and sometimes a little scary, journey into a future that's both familiar and totally strange. And even though we've only just scratched the surface of this huge and complex topic, I hope we've made you curious and left you with more questions than answers.
Because that's what the deep dive is all about. Exploring new ideas, questioning what we think we know, and having meaningful conversations about the future we're building.
So if you've enjoyed this exploration of the emulation era, make sure to like and subscribe for more mind-bending deep dives into the world of tomorrow. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep those imaginations working.
And remember, the future is what we make it, so let's make it a good one.